I'm gonna try to make more videos like this, kind of just talking about stuff. So a topic that I was thinking of was in regards to strength training and powerlifting, and this topic of like different kinds of programs. So they have like conventional programs and you have unconventional programs. You have training styles that are conventional and that are more traditional, and you have training styles that are unconventional and are much less traditional. And I think that there's value in doing both, in trying both, in using and experimenting and testing both. And I could kind of go over my experience of doing each of them and kind of the pros and cons. So when I say conventional training, I kind of think of a lot of different like programs, like lately like RPE style training is very popular, but any of these powerlifting programs where you have to do 3 sets of 8, or you have to do 5 sets of 5 or 7 sets of 3, and you have to gradually build volume, and you have your you gradually build volume, and like the earlier weeks you're working with lighter weights and you're doing lower intensity and then higher frequency, and then as the weeks progress your intensity goes up and your total volume maybe starts to come down a little bit and your frequency comes down. These are very traditional type of programs, like the 3x7, 5x5, and kind of like if you get someone to do powerlifting programming for you, they'll do something like this. A lot of lifters, they'll make good progress with programming like that, and uses a lot of squat, a lot of bench, a lot of deadlift, and it works, and that's why most people use it, and it will kind of work for them. But the thing is, there are other lifters who make progress who maybe don't always use workouts like that, or who use a lot of stuff that's unconventional. I'd say some of the greatest of all time lifters have experimented or trained with ways that are pretty unconventional, because if you train for 20 years you'll find your own way. So even when you go by the traditional type of programming, traditional type of training, it's not an exact science. Powerlifting isn't an exact science. It's very subjective. We're all built differently. We all have different limb lengths. We have different tendencies. I think personality matters. Like I know that that's something that does matter. Like if you're the type to be able to sit through like 2 hours of training, or if you'd get distracted, and maybe some kind of shorter training but that's like more intensity based maybe works better for your personality. So there's that. There's if you're genetically built for a certain lift or not. Some people are genetically built better for one lift than another. Some people heal up faster at one lift than another, and there are so many individual variables. It's extremely subjective. So traditional programs work, but at the same time it's not an exact science. So then there's the untraditional types of programs. When I think of these type of programs, I think of lifters like George Lehman, like Eric Bugenhagen, who else? Jason Mike. That's he's not like a well-known lifter, but there are different lifters who are who kind of have trained like unorthodox ways and unconventional ways. Kevin Bowie, he's an interesting one. He's a cool one too, where for example, Kevin Bowie, he would deadlift four times a week, and he built up a deadlift like that. Or Eric Bugenhagen will take one exercise and train it over weeks, train only that exercise and get it super strong. And George Lehman would do a lot of sets of 20 and get exercises very strong like that. So how he would train, it's not a wrong way to train, and there are people who like traditional ways and like untraditional ways. Like those untraditional lifters, they'll be like fuck doing the 5x5 training because I think it's boring and like everyone else is doing it, and I don't want to be doing what everyone else is doing. And they might have a point. And then the people who are doing the traditional types, they're like, okay, those people who are doing the untraditional types, they're like unfocused and they're not structured and they're not disciplined and they're kind of fooling around and stuff, and it's like very sloppy, and like I don't like that. And I like this very systematic type of training where like I know what I'm going to do, and like I know this will work. It's worked for a lot of other people, and it's traditional and it works. I find, and I've seen this in different fields, that if you can have a little bit of both, if you can be in both worlds, that it's the most advantage to you. You know, take from both worlds and don't be in just one. That's my opinion. Commit to one at a time. So like I'll have training blocks where I've committed it to a traditional type of training block where I'm doing the 5 sets of 5. I'm doing knocking off sets as like time progresses, and the reps get lower, the intensity goes up, the sets go down. I've done the quote unquote boring traditional type of programs, and when I'm doing those, a lot of the time I'm thinking of doing an unconventional type next, but I've also done the unconventional types. I've done 20 rep sets. I've done building up just one exercise and getting it really strong with high reps and stuff, and really experimenting with different variations and getting certain variations stronger, things that aren't structured, that aren't an exact science, and are very unorthodox, very unconventional. The thing is that like everything works. The biggest thing is consistency and progressive overload. So if you're getting just a little bit better over time, if you're adding weight on the bar over time, you'll get stronger. And you could do it conventionally, you could do it unconventionally. There's not a right way or a wrong way. I think there's value in learning both. I think that when you learn the traditional types, like you learn to be kind of disciplined, focused. You learn consistency. You learn sticking to something, sticking to a routine. And with the unconventional stuff, you learn creativity. You learn thinking outside the box. You learn being subjective. You learn not just sticking to a program. You learn how to listen to your own body and listen to your own tendencies and your and like kind of what works for you, what doesn't, what exercises work for you, what doesn't. You learn subjectivity. You learn creativity. And you learn to have fun with your training and not to always be pencil and paper. There's value to both types of training. Something else too I can say is that a lot of the time your personality will naturally lean towards one type of training or another, but I've found that when your personality leans towards a certain way, you don't always want to go and do what your personality leans towards, because a lot of the time the greatest strength is in balancing your personality and not always going towards what you'll naturally, because of your personality, gravitate towards. So for me, naturally, if I were honest, I think I would gravitate more towards that unconventional type of training, because I have been kind of rebellious, like just from childhood, and I am kind of more of like that unconventional spirit where I'm like, oh, like everyone is doing this, like F everyone else, like F what they're doing. I'm gonna do it my way. I'm gonna do it different. I don't want to do something just because everyone else is doing it. But and I did those kinds of training, you know, where I wrote it out myself, and it's 20 reps, and it's a lot of fun. But I saw that there was a lot of value in doing the traditional types of training too, where you have to focus and sit down with the piece of pencil, or with the piece of paper and pencil, and like kind of stick to, okay, this is what works. This has worked for a lot of other people. This is very traditional, very quote unquote boring, but I'll stick to it. And I found that I had a lot of fun in those training cycles too. And I got much stronger in those training cycles too. And one type of training cycle didn't necessarily get me stronger than another type. Each of them just kind of got me stronger. I had goals, and I would somewhat, to a certain degree, achieve those goals. And even now, I'll do traditional blocks, I'll do untraditional blocks. Right now, I'm on a very traditional powerlifting block for like 8 weeks of training, 8 weeks straight. But then when that gets done, I've been thinking about it. I'm going to do like a unconventional type of training where I do like just 1 or 2 exercises, and I maybe even train them every day, and I get them really strong, and it'll be a lot of fun. And I'll just like do an Eric Bugenhagen style where he throws on weight like each week. So part of it is experimenting, and part of it is, just kind of having fun and seeing what happens with that kind of training. But my point is this, that each of them work. Each of them got me stronger. And like when I did a traditional program versus a not traditional program, not one of them was necessarily better or worse than the other. And not one of them like got me less strong or not than the other, you know? I did like the Ed Cohn deadlift program, which in my opinion is pretty unconventional and not traditional. So that like put, I think, like 40 pounds or 50 pounds on my deadlift when I did it 2 or 3 years ago, and it was pretty significant. But I also did what was it, something much more traditional. it was either like a conventional type of powerlifting program I wrote out myself, or just the traditional Ed Cohn program that he would do, where squat, bench, deadlift, and maybe like a fourth accessory day, and like you start with the high reps in the early weeks, and then the later weeks there's low reps. You start with your hypertrophy block, then you go to a strength block, then you go to an intensity block. You start with lower intensities, then you go to medium, and then higher intensities. It's very traditional, very textbook, and I did that, and I got great results too, and I had a lot of fun doing it too, and I learned a lot. So ultimately, lifting isn't an exact science. There are traditional type of programs, untraditional types of programs. Both work, and it's finding what works for you, what you like, and a lot of it is personality, where you are in your life, fitting it in with the rest of your life and your schedule. Like how many days can you devote to training? How much time can you devote to training? What are your goals at that time? Are you training for a meet or not? Do you just want to get stronger? Do you just want to look good? Do you just want to have fun? Ultimately, at the end of the day, what just matters is consistency and getting just a tiny bit better over time, the progressive overload. And after that, you can kind of do whatever you want, and you can have a lot of fun. And there's no real way to train. There's no correct way to train. It's just getting better over time. And I've found that that's best. When I trained clients, I would train different clients very, very differently, because some things might work for some clients, some things might not. Some clients respond well to volume, some don't. Some respond well to heavy weights, some don't. Some really, like, their personalities were that unconventional type, so I would just like keep throwing on weight each week. And some of them, they like the textbook, like, okay, we're gonna hit this many sets, this many reps, and they know it from like a week or two ahead, so they know like what to expect. And all my clients got stronger and worked. Like, I trained moms and stuff that got much stronger without even intending to, because it is subjective. And at the end of the day, if you're a coach for another person, or if you're a coach, you're always a coach, because if you're doing your own training, even if you're going off a program, you're coaching yourself, you're learning your own body, your own tendencies. A lot of it is in the learning. It's in experimenting, testing, and then seeing what works and what doesn't at that point in time. So you can kind of find out what works for you. So that's my kind of thought on it. If you have traditional programs or untraditional programs, try both, and commit to one for 8 to 10 weeks or 12 weeks or even 16 weeks, and then see how it went. Take notes, take results, and then go again and maybe try something different. If you always stick to traditional, maybe try untraditional sometime. And if you've always stuck to untraditional, maybe try to traditional sometime, and try something different, because a lot of things work. Technically, everything works. Some things work better than others, but it's very subjective, and what might work for you will be different for you at like another time, or different for like another person. So it is just testing it out, experimenting, and having fun. So those are kind of some scattered thoughts on that topic, but yeah, I hope that helps. And yeah, like, try with both types of programs. Try with untraditional or traditional.